Donc, je vais donner la parole maintenant au docteur Sammartano, qui doit être en ligne et qui donc va nous présenter des travaux menés en Italie. Bonjour.
Hello, everyone. So my name is Sammartano. I'm a clinician from Italy, and it's a true honor to be here at the European Parliament with you. I'm speaking on the behalf of Professor Letizia Sabadini, that is the president of our organization, the IADEE, the Italian Association of Dyspraxie in the Developmental Age and Adulthood. And also, I'm speaking as a member of the Association Executive Board. So today I bring the voice, the work, and the perspective of Professor Letizia Sabadini, together with the experience of a national network of clinicians, teachers, parents, and families who deal every day with the reality of neurodevelopmental disorders, and in particular with DCD, often referred to Italy as a dyspraxia. The title of my talk is about complexity, comorbidity, and correlation because it's what we teach during our training in healthcare professional. I believe that these three words, complexity, comorbidity, and correlation, are very crucial today, not only to describe the functioning of the children and young people we work with, but also to rethink diagnosis, research, education, rehabilitation, and public policy. So you can go to the third slide, please. Our organization, okay, thank you. Thank you so much. Our organization is an Italian social promotion association open to specialists, teachers, and parents. It was founded in 2007, thanks to the initiative of Professoressa Letizia Sabadini, with the aim of promoting scientific and clinical awareness of dyspraxia and related neurodevelopmental disorders. Go on, skip. Over the years, our organization has built a wide and active national networks. It trains healthcare professionals, clinicians, and teachers. It promotes researches. It supports families and schools. It encourages early recognition, and it works to foster timely and appropriate intervention aimed at improving the quality of life. As you can see in the three slides, you can go on. In the next three slides, you can see what the association is organized across Italy through territorial section, regional groups, and parents' committee. This matters because it shows that we need for information, support, and recognition that is not occasional. It's whispered, constant, and urgent. Go on. In 2025, our organization organize events, webinars, and in the next slide, you can see our Dyspraxia Awareness Week. These are not only dissemination activities, these are spaces where awareness is built, isolation is reduced, and clinical knowledge is connected with school and society. You can go on the 11. Now we can see that developmental is not linear. It's modular. You can go on the next slide, please. Thank you. The next one. Thank you. It cannot be reduced to isolated function working independently, one to another. On the contrary, neurodevelopmental is a dynamic, independent, and time-sensitive process in which genetic, neurobiology, experience, environment, learning, and relationship continuously interact with each other. This means that children's developmental profiles are almost never pure. In clinical work, we rarely meet children with only motor difficulties, or only language difficulties, or only attentional ones. More often, we see profiles in which several domains intervene, influence one another, and sometimes compensate for one to another. Next slide, please. This means that children's, as you can see, we want to stress an important distinction. complexity does not mean confusion today. Complexity is not a limitation of our clinical work. It is a property of the system itself. The problem arises when we try to describe this complexity through models that are too simple or categories that are too rigid to represent the reality of development. In the sense of our responsibility as clinicians and researchers and educators and also policymakers is also a cultural one. We need conceptual frameworks that are able to reflect the developmental reality more faithfully. You can go on. Next slide. Next one, please. Okay. You can see how, for a long time, comorbidity was mainly seen as a diagnostic problem. But today, the coexistence of several diagnoses in the same person, almost as if one made the loss less clear. But in neurodevelopmental disorders, comorbidity is not the exception. It is very often the rule. DCD, ADHD, specific learning disorders, language disorders, and autism spectrum disorders frequently occur together or overlap. Next slide, please. The occurrence can be interpreted as the expression of complex interaction between partially shared brain networks, distinct vulnerabilities, and developmental trajectories that influence one another. In other words, we can observe, next slide, motor, language, attentional, and learning difficulties together. We are not simply looking at a list of deficits. We are observing a complex developmental organization. Next slide. And this change the kind of question we should ask. So we can ask not only what is the diagnosis, but also what shared mechanisms are involved in, what functions support adaptation, and which ones hinder it, what developmental trajectories can still be modified, what environmental factors can make a difference. So that's very important for us. Next slide, please. Because I want to talk to you about correlation. The correlation between motor, language, attentional, and learning difficulties are not only statistical findings. They are not just numbers in a table. They indicate that different developmental domains are organized together, and that when one domain is fragile, this may create cascading effects on other action and function and aspect of functioning. Next slide. So let us consider our motor coordination. If a child struggles to plan action, sequence movements, and organize gesture in space and time, this difficulty does not remain limited to the motor domain. It can affect autonomy, school participation, access to learning, emotional regulation, self-confidence, and peer relationship. Next. And the reverse is also true. Language, attentional, or executive difficulties may weaken the child's ability to organize action and learn efficiently through the experience. So that's why I find these three words shown in this slide especially meaningful: knowledge, sharing, and coordination. Knowledge, because without updated knowledge, the risk is failing to recognize difficulties or recognizing them too late. Sharing, because no single professional can fully understand this profile alone. And coordination, because children do not need fragmented intervention. They need networks able to read their functioning together. And so, as you can see in the next slide, the transdiagnostic turn. This brings us to a crucial step, that is the transdiagnostic shift, the turn. Diagnoses truly remain very important. They are necessary for the access to right services, educational supports, and institutional communication. We are not suggesting that diagnoses should disappear. However, diagnoses become insufficient sometimes when they are mistaken for a complex explanation of functioning. In the next slide, A diagnostic label alone does not describe outcomes, does not explain processes, and does not guide intervention with enough specificity. A transdiagnostic perspective does not abolish categories, it moves through them. It shifts the focus from categories to mechanism, from disorders to functioning profile, from diagnosis boundary to shared dimension. This is especially relevant for DCD and dyspraxia, which main contexts have historically been under-recognized or treated as a secondary or a marginal condition. So we are dealing with conditions that deeply affect planning, gesture organization, participation, learning, and autonomy. For this reason, they occupy a central place in understanding of complex developmental profiles. Next slide, please. Now, you can see in this part what about our organization. Our organization shares some ongoing projects and research activities. Here again, the common rationale is very clear. Neurodevelopmental disorders must be understood as a complex condition of characteristic by dynamic interaction among sensory, motor, bodily, cognitive, adaptive, behavioral, and emotional regulatory components. This leads with three methodological consequences. First, moving beyond category reading. Second, placing the functioning profile at the center. And third, evaluating dimensions shared by different disorders, including DCD, ADHD, specific learning disorders, and mixing profile. Go to the 24. Among the profile mentioned in this slide in a study of relation between DCD and joint laxity. Next one, please. Another work is involving about ABAS-3 and APCM2, aimed at exploring correlation with participation. We have questionnaires for teachers and students to identify signs of dyspraxia in different kind of age groups and the impact of coordination disorders on adaptive function, such as an example, activities of daily life. Another line of research is about Sabadini and Bono, with the hypothesis of aligning science in deficits motor praxis coordination and the developmental of DCD, even in adolescence when unfortunately has not been previously diagnosed. These projects are important not only for the specific results, but also for what they represent. They show that DCD and dyspraxia cannot be confined at the early childhood, not only to specialist clinical setting. It concerns school life, participation, everyday functioning, transition to adolescence and adulthood, and therefore there are right to recognize and support across the whole lifespan. Next slide, please. And now let's talk about a crucial point, that it's from rehabilitation to the rehabilitation of functioning. Another major message of these slides concern specifically the rehabilitation. Next one, please. If disorders share mechanism and developmental trajectories, the intervention must also become early, integrated, and transdomain. The statement is extremely important. For many years, in several contexts, intervention was organized as it simply had to match a single diagnostic level. But when real life is functioning in a multidimensional way, intervention cannot be built as a sum of disconnected pieces. Work on a motor practice coordination does not mean working only on movements. It means supporting action coordination, reducing executive load, facilitating participation, and promoting language, learning, and self-regulation. This is exactly where dyspraxia most clearly shows its cross-domain nature. When a child cannot efficiently organize action, that child is not simply clumsy. Very often, the child must invent a huge amount of cognitive resources to do things that are automatic for the others. This increasing executive load reduces efficiency, creates fatigue, may interfere with learning, and may negatively affect participation. This is why multisystemic, multifunctional, and integrated approaches are so valuable, such as Sabadini methods show us. There are not only rehabilitative approaches, they also represent a more adequate cultural model, that is a cultural one, because they help us to see a child such as a developing system rather than a collection of symptoms. So why at this point I want to widen the perspective? Because speaking about dyspraxia and DCD and neurodevelopmental disorders in a place such as the European Parliament is not only about presenting clinical data and statistical one, it is also about calling attention on several priorities. The first is recognition. Many children and young people of DCD, with DCD and dyspraxia are still identified too late. The second is training. Training healthcare profession is very important. It's one of our aim of our organization. We need training for a care professional, teachers, pediatricians, and all those working in educational and developmental services. Third is continuity of care and support. These difficulties do not simply disappear. They change in form and context, but they may continue to affect learning, autonomy, employability, psychological well-being, and social participation. The fourth is truly interdisciplinary perspective. Children and people do not live inside an administrative compartments. They live in families, they go to school, they go to the services, and live in communities. And finally, there is an issue of equity. Timely recognition and appropriate intervention in a multidisciplinary way are not privileges. They are conditions that can change our cultural model. So the next slide, please, because there are conclusions. So I would like to conclude by talking to you on what is essential for our organization. It's essential to work in a multidisciplinary teams, to identify shared diagnostic criteria, to improve assessment capacity, and above all to promote precise and early diagnosis, aim at an appropriate intervention and a more positive prognosis. This is the heart I bring today on the behalf of Professor Letizia Sabadini and our organization all. We can no longer explain neurodevelopmental disorders through our simple model. We can no longer treat DCD and dyspraxia as a marginal issue. We can no longer artificially separate the motor domain from the cognitive one, language from relationship, and clinical dimension from the social one. We need a culture able to hold together complexity, comorbidity, and correlation, and that's what we train today with our professional. We need research, training, and alliance between professionals and families, and we need institutions to recognize that investing in early diagnosis, integrated support, and participation for people with neurodevelopmental disorders means investing in fairer, more competent, and more inclusive society. So thank you very much for learning, for listening to me, and for your attention.
Est-ce que vous pouvez nous expliquer ce que vous faites en matière de formation des professionnels de santé? Est-ce que vous avez entrepris des actions? Comment vous l'avez organisé? Quel bilan vous pouvez en tirer?
Okay, our training activities are in a multidisciplinary way. There are clinicians, psychologists, speech therapists, and neuropsychomotricisti. We train both healthcare teacher and parents together. We have different kind of training, and we try to train what is the complexity of neurodevelopmental disorder and DCD, and what is the functioning of the people with DCD at school, during at home, and also in the free time. Okay, and with the healthcare profession, we do a specific training about tests. Using tests, what kind of tests they have to use, and about the multisystemic review that you can see as Sabadini methods. we do a lot of training. We do not have a limited number per year. We organize webinars, person courses, courses about awareness initiatives such as Dyspraxie Week.
Est-ce que vous avez des actions de formation spécifiques en direction des médecins, par exemple, ou est-ce que ce sont un peu les mêmes pour tous les professionnels de santé?
We have a formation. Excuse me, I'm shifting from French to English. It's kind of weird. We have a training for the healthcare professional, which are speech therapists, psychomotricisti, and doctors and clinicians, all together in one course.
Et des médecins également? Des médecins également? Des médecins aussi?
Oui. Phoniatrician, which I am, pediatrician, physiatrician, and neuropsychiatrics.
D'accord. Et vous arrivez à toucher tous les médecins, ou est-ce que c'est sur la base du volontariat? Comment ça se passe?
It's a volunteer. Yeah, it's a volunteer course. Some people ask us to organize them, and then we organize for departments. For example, there are some departments, the maternity one, consultorio, and so on, that ask us to organize for them courses. And so we can just suit for them about what they are asking for us, because we have courses about childhood, adolescence, and adulthood. Three kind of with shape of courses, because they have different kind of necessity.
Et alors pour finir sur la question des formations des médecins, est-ce que vous intervenez aussi dans les études de médecine, ou c'est simplement de la formation continue?
Formation continue. In the School of Medicine, just for the neuropsychiatrician and phoniatrician and physiatrician, and also the pediatrician one, but not during the year of medicine, not all over Italy. So I speak from Turin. Because I'm here in Turin, and we try to speak to our future doctor what's about DCD. There are other groups in Rome, some other in Rome, Naples, and Padua, but it's not all over Italy. It's not cover everyone.
Et comment vous expliquez ça, le fait qu'il n'y en ait pas partout? C'est un manque de moyens, c'est un manque de prise de conscience des facultés? Comment vous expliquez que ça ne se fasse pas partout, ces formations?
It's a regional, we have a regional distribution of here in Italy. We have in the healthcare professional, okay? So the university is by region.
Très bien, merci pour toutes ces explications. Pas d'autres questions? Très bien, merci beaucoup.